We've been looking at some of the key bikes for 2018, and the Specialized Epic Expert is one of those bikes. The Specialized Epic is to cross-country racing what the Hoover is to vacuum cleaning. Almost. In the many years that the Epic has been around, it's had 96 major victories, including Olympics, World Championships, and stage races like the Cape Epic. So if you're looking for a bike to cross ground very quickly, the Epic has to be up there in your shortlist. The Epic's USP is its brain technology, and this is something that Specialized has been working on for a number of years now. Basically, the brain is an auto-opening and closing of the compression circuit of the suspension. What this means is that, in theory, on smooth terrain, say a fire road climb, your suspension is automatically locked out, and as soon as you hit those bumps, it opens up and you have a full suspension rig that is able to carry speed over rougher terrain. For 2018, Specialized have overhauled the Epic to reflect a little bit on what's going on in the world of cross-country racing and, arguably, in the world of trail riding too. Specialized have worked on the tech included in the brain. First of all, they've relocated it behind the rear axle of the suspension system, and this makes it a little bit more reactive, as has an opening of the ports in the brain, allowing oil to flow easier through the whole system. What this means is that you have a more reactive system that can also be rider tuned, so you can run it relatively close, so it's relatively firm and will only react to the bigger hits, or you can run it really open for those rougher tracks. In terms of cross-country racing, tracks are getting gnarlier all the time and full suspension bikes are starting to dominate. You'll still see a number of riders racing on hardtails on some of the smoother tracks, but where the tracks are rougher, say Nove Mesto or Mont Saint Anne, where riders have a full suspension option, they are often taking this now. We kind of feel that the other area in which Specialized are aiming to capitalise on is those trail riders who are potentially looking for bikes that can cross large numbers of miles but still hit slightly more technical terrain, or even some of the little jumps that might be out there. So to do this, they've played with the geometry of the bike as well. Cross-country bikes have traditionally been a little bit more road bike-like in their shape, so steeper, a little bit shorter. Specialized have lengthened the bike a little bit, they've made it a little bit slacker. Specialized have worked with RockShox on the SID for this bike, and that means it's a special one for the Epic. We've got the brain technology in there, which we've described already, but what they've also done is shorten the offset of the fork. It's 42mm, and this means that you have an increased trail figure. The Epic is a cross-country bike, and therefore it still has a relatively steep head angle, but increasing that trail calms the whole bike down. So you've still got a bike that is swift to change direction, which is still agile and reactive to your inputs, but it's also reasonably calm. It doesn't feel too nadry, it doesn't feel nervous at all down the trail. And this means that if you aren't a cross-country racer but you are a trail rider, this bike still rides really nicely on less XC trails. While obviously Specialized have worked on the suspension and the geometry of the frame, they've also worked on the weight. On the non-S-Works version of the bike, they've dropped over half a kilo from the frame weight alone. The way they've done this is by dropping the chainstay pivot, which would have made it an FSR 4-bar suspension system, and they've introduced flex into the rear triangle instead of that pivot. On the trail then, you get a supremely confident cross-country race bike. The addition of that trail up front makes the bike calm and easy to ride. The brain technology does kind of split opinions, but on the whole we're actually quite a big fan of it on a bike like this. We've been running it towards its softer settings, but you can still feel the valve opening and closing when you do hit those bumps. The rear especially sends a little clunk through the frame. You might not like that, or you might think it really detracts from the ride, but to be honest, you're getting a bike that climbs exceptionally well without having to faff around with lockouts. So we reckon on a bike like this, it's probably a price worth paying. While we rode with the rear shock with a couple of clicks of the brain damping on, we tended to ride the fork fully open. This is because it did feel a little bit lurchy, a little bit less controlled when it's popping between open and closed, especially on the climbs. We're going to be critical about the tyres as well. A lot of the kit on this bike is Specialized own brand stuff, and generally speaking it's pretty good. The tyres, they aren't really our favourites. They are fast rolling, but they're pretty limited in scope as to what they can really handle. If you're going to ride it as a trail bike, you'll definitely want to change them, and if you're going to race this bike, you might want to be looking at the race course and really deciding whether you do want to race with the fast track tyres or not. In terms of value for money, it's probably not the best out there. Canyon, for example, kill it at this price point. But you do get some really interesting technology, and the frame has shed a lot of weight for this year. You can't help but notice the paint scheme on this bike, and that extends across the range of the Epics. It's sparkly, it's gold, it's bright and it's brash, and that almost exudes the confidence that this bike gives you on the trail. A lot of people maybe don't like the speckly, sparkly paint job. I love it, but you should probably see it in person before you make too much of a judgment on it. It's a really innovative and interesting bike, and it performs exceptionally well in the terrain it's designed to do so in, and that's why it's one of our key bikes for 2018.